I want to first say thanks to Father Dwayne for bringing me back. I spoke to the youth last year, and it was great. I really enjoy talking to the next generation because they are our future. But I want to start with a story I want to share about myself. Now, I'm not really proud of it, but I'm proud to bring it to you so hopefully you don't make the same mistake. When I served in Operation Persian Gulf War, like the Desert Shield, Desert Storm in the early 90s, 90, 91, long before you guys. But and when I came home, I had an encounter with a guy, a white guy, and he called me the N-word. You know, we don't like that. We don't like that at all, right? So here it was, you know, I've been all overseas where another country that we're fighting and they're supposed to hate me and they have a reason. And I come back home and here it is, someone that I go to school with, known my whole life, and he said something that offensive. And I still try to brush it off and he won't let it go. Now he's a little bit inebriated, but I didn't know that at the time. And the guy's a little bigger than myself. So I said, well, we can't let this happen. Needless to say, I had a gun. And so he approached me and I defended myself with the gun. Now I didn't shoot him, I just pistol whipped him. And the guy fell to the ground and quickly thereafter, a friend of mine, he was in the car with me, he get out and a big altercation with other guys that are there. But needless to say, shortly thereafter, the police shows up. And it was a police officer that knew me. He knew my mom. My mother was a school teacher, and he worked security at the school. So he knew me from knowing my mother. And he gets there, and he said, Carlos, do you have a gun? And I told him, yeah, I sure do. And he said, man, why? You know, what are you doing with a gun? So as I'm explaining to him, hey, this guy called me the N-word. He's like, you still can't have a gun. It's just a word. Well, maybe to you it's a word, but to me it's highly offensive, extremely offensive. And he wasn't black, so he didn't understand where I was coming from. So I thought he was Latino. So he did have a degree of understanding, but not in full. So he arrested me and I go to jail and I spend the night in jail. And the whole time, all I was thinking is, how am I going to get out of this? In the morning, my mama will be here to pick me up. I wasn't worried about the judge, the crime, the sentence, or anything. I was worried about how am I going to explain this to Alice Wallace? After all the things that she had taught me, this wasn't a part of the plan. And I forgot, I left out a little part that my grandfather was a judge. Yeah, so after dealing with her, I know I'm gonna have to deal with him. This might not work out. This is a part of the time I said, well, it might be safer to just stay in jail. So about 6:30, the bailiff comes in and he says, Wallace, your mother's here, because they knew her too. And I walk out real slow, and she just standing there shaking her head. And I shook my head. And I looked at the guy like, hey man, can I just stay here? And he just ushered me out. And he said, Alice, you take it from here. Because they knew I knew better. So she says to me, look, we're going to go talk to the judge now. I didn't know she had already talked to him, and he talked to my grandfather. So, and court doesn't even open till 8. It's 6:35. How are we going to talk to a judge at 6:35? I'm not on the docket. I can't be. So we get there, and the judge is waiting. He said, man, come in my chambers. I want to talk to you. What were you thinking? I couldn't answer. He asked me again, what were you thinking? I shrugged my shoulders. He said, I need an answer. I couldn't give him an answer. He said, well, I'll tell you what. You let me keep that gun, and we'll just act like this never happened. Sir, you have just acquired yourself a gun. I don't need it that bad. So from the jail in the courthouse to my parents' house was 13 miles. The longest 13 miles of my life. I think it was about 1,300 miles. Now, my mama said a whole lot of stuff, but the complete message was you get home and pack your stuff and get back to Houston right now. We're from a small East Texas town, and she said, you need to get back to Houston. Now, there was a whole lot of stuff that I can't really repeat in this, but that was the gist of it. So when we get home, I start packing, and the phone rings. It's the chief of police. He said, Carlos, I know you're on your way back to Houston because I know Alice, but I want you to come by here and I want to show you something. Okay. So I go by and he showed me the statement that my friend had written about me, saying that I purchased the gun and that I made a promise that I was going to kill me a white person and on and I'm thinking, what? We never even had this discussion. Like, I've never even said this. But needless to say, my character and who I was and the history of my family and all of these things played a huge part in that chief saying, I knew better, that judge saying, hey, you need to do better. That's what played a big part. But had it not, let's say I'd have gone to trial. At that time, aggravated assault, which is what the charge would have been, in Texas, was a mandatory 20 years, and you have to serve 80% of your time before you can be released. I wouldn't be here talking to you guys right now. And when I did get out and talk to you guys, it would be a whole lot different story. So sometimes, now, is the system flawed? Absolutely. But what gives us opportunity to engulf us into a flawed system, sometimes it's the people around us. See, when I tell that story, a lot of people get really upset about the N-word. I was more upset about my friend. Because this is a guy that I thought would have really been there for me. The guy that called me the name, I don't know him. He's a stranger. I grew up with him, but I don't know him. But this is a guy that I've known since I was 3 years old. And my father had told me time and time again, he is not your friend. See, his name was George, and he had been in the Army, and I was in the Navy. But since we returned, I moved on my life. I was an engineer with the railroad. He was still living with his parents, and all he talked about was wanting to go back to Germany. And my dad would say, look, dude, all this guy's talking about going back to yesterday, and you've moved on to tomorrow. That guy is not your friend. Pay attention to the context clues. But Daddy, you don't understand. Man, this dude, my friend, you don't get it. Sometimes your parents know things that you don't know. They see things that you don't see. I promise. But I just wanted to share that with y'all because that story really, really, really could have went a whole different way, whole different direction. So the character you build right now, and it's even harder now because of social media. There was a young man in Houston that was beat up by the police, and when they went to court to try to sue the police, they had his whole social media on the projector. And when he went in there, he was an assault victim. When he left, he was a gang member. And all the things on his social media was rap lyrics. And 4 things I want you to keep on your mind today and forever. Number 1, I want you to ask yourself, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be? Honestly, when I was your age, I just thought I was going to be an engineer. Why? Because that's what my dad was, my grandfather. I'm 5th generation railroad. So I knew I was going to work for the railroad because that's just what our family does. Had no idea I would ever write 2 bestsellers. Had no idea I would do a national comedy tour, produce a TV show, 2 movies. I didn't know that, not at that age. But I want you to ask yourself that, because the opportunities are there. See, I didn't know the opportunities were there. I grew up in a town of 13,000 people, small East Texas. If you'd asked me when I was 15 or 16, would I ever write a book, I would ask if you were crazy. If you'd asked me at 26, I would have said the same thing. But at 36, when I lost my father, my second parent, I became the oldest person in my family. My vision became a lot different, because now I am the man of the family, not just the house of my whole family. So things are different. You start to say, look, where is there to be afraid of now? The worst thing that can happen is I can die and go be with my parents. So now I started to dream bigger, and that's what led me to where I am now. So I want you to ask yourself that. And the second thing, why do you want to do that? Don't let it be because of money. You should want to do something that you wouldn't mind doing free. Now, I didn't say do it free, but you shouldn't mind doing it free. Money should only determine one thing: your level of comfort in life. That's it. Now, I ain't saying it should determine whether you get the Jordans or the Steph Currys. It just determines whether you have shoes or not. That's it. I'm not saying it should determine whether you get a Bentley or a Buick. It just means if you are blessed with a car, you too can have air conditioner so you're not in the heat on your way to church and sweating. That's all. Your level of comfort. It doesn't mean, because I tell you, the $200,000 Bentley is just as frustrating in traffic as the $40,000 Buick. The next thing, find someone that does that and study what they did. Not just as a profession, but what do they do in the community? What type of character is that individual? Because what you see on TV may not be the reality of who they are. So find someone you can touch, somebody you can walk up to, someone you can feel, someone you can say, hey, what church should I attend? What type of events should I be involved in? What type of extracurricular activities at school should I participate to help me get to where I want to go with what it is I want to do? And let that person be the answer. Don't look up to people that you don't know. And then when they do something crazy and they let you down, I see Teresa on Facebook. I'm sure y'all seen him crying. And people say, man, I feel bad for Teresa. I said, you don't even know that guy. It's all a show. It's all a show for him. Don't do that. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Oklahoma at the NACA convention. It's a big convention for speakers that go to colleges and so forth. And Chrisette Michelle was there. You guys know her? She made a very, very bad mistake the earlier part of this year. She sang for Donald Trump at his inauguration. Now, it may be some Trump supporters here, but this is just a true story. So don't stone the messenger. But there was a long list of R&B singers that had turned Donald Trump down, and it was for a reason. Now, I'm a proud union man, so I understand strikes, and I also understand a person that's a scab and break the line. Like when you do that, that's very vital. You don't do it. Well, I compare what she did to crossing the line. When there's a long list of people that said no, and then she say yes, and I wanted to say to her, you wasn't even first choice. You wasn't even 50th choice. You were what was left. And you ruined your career to say yes. And as I talk to people about it, they say, well, Carlos, maybe she needed the money. No, because I think it was $250,000. Well, after you pay your agency and bookers and on and on and taxes, and so she may have left with about $100,000, and her career is over. Since then, she's tried to commit suicide. Her record label dropped her. Her agency dropped her. Her boyfriend broke up with her. But most importantly, Her family disowned her. She's in the world all by herself. One decision. Based on money. Liz's mother and I, we talk about this a lot, about selling your soul. Like, I don't think anybody just sits at the table and make a negotiation with the devil and say, hey, for these accomplishments, I'll give you my soul. I think you make them along the way in life. It's little things you do along the way. Just gives away a little piece of you along the way, and eventually you don't even know who you are. And that's a piece of it. And the last thing I want to say, when you make the determination of what it is you want to do, don't let anything or anyone stand in your way. Now, keep all those in mind. So I gave this speech before, and I go around and I was asking youth what they wanted to do. And one guy, he thought he was going to catch me off guard. He said he wanted to be a drug dealer. I said, man, why you want to do that? He said, because they have a lot of power. Really? I said, well, let me share something with you. I said, now, you can take a multi-million-dollar drug dealer that he got tons of money, lots of cars, but it's a $40,000 DA that'll send him to jail for life. So the drug dealer had more money than the DA, but that DA had more power. So I think you should want to be the DA, not the drug dealer.